As the conflict in Eastern Europe grinds into its third year, a complex interplay of diplomatic stagnation, strategic escalations, and a rapidly evolving technological arms race continues to define the landscape. Recent developments from late June 2025 underscore a deepening stalemate on the ground, even as both sides relentlessly pursue advancements in drone warfare and leverage information campaigns to shape international perceptions. The future of the conflict appears increasingly tied to technological innovation and the unwavering resolve of key players. At the heart of the current diplomatic impasse are the unyielding demands of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who reiterated to Sky News Arabia on June 20 that long-term peace hinges on Ukraine accepting neutrality, rejecting foreign alliances, and agreeing to nuclear non-proliferation. Crucially, Putin insisted that Kyiv must recognize Russian control over the illegally annexed and partially occupied Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia oblasts, threatening further aggression otherwise. This stance, which echoes pre-war demands from 2022 Istanbul negotiations, is consistently interpreted by the Institute for the Study of War (ISW) as a thinly veiled call for the elimination of Ukraine as a sovereign entity. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky swiftly countered Putin's statements, emphasizing that Russia's ideology as articulated by Putin clearly signals an intent to seize all of Ukraine and potentially extend claims to neighboring states like Belarus, the Baltic states, Moldova, the Caucasus, and Central Asian countries. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha powerfully asserted that Russian soldiers bring only death, destruction, and devastation wherever they tread, urging the international community to escalate support for Ukraine, impose severe economic sanctions, recognize Russia as a terrorist state, and enforce complete diplomatic isolation to compel Putin to accept genuine peace. This exchange highlights the profound chasm in objectives, with Moscow seeking capitulation and Kyiv demanding decisive international action to preserve its sovereignty. Adding another layer to the information warfare, Kremlin officials appear to be reviving the false narrative that Ukraine intends to use a dirty bomb against Russia. Putin himself at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum (SPIF) on June 20 cautioned against such a colossal mistake, promising a catastrophic response from Russia even while admitting to a lack of evidence for Ukraine's intent. This was quickly amplified by Russian Security Council Deputy Chairperson Dmitry Medvedev, who on June 21 claimed Russia would respond with a tactical nuclear weapon if Ukraine deployed a dirty bomb. Analysts including ISW suggest this narrative, previously intensified in March and October 2022, serves as a deliberate attempt to influence Western discussions on providing additional military assistance to Ukraine and to undermine resolve, especially amidst ongoing debates in the United States and Europe. Perhaps the most significant and dynamic aspect of the current conflict lies in the rapidly accelerating drone warfare. Russia is demonstrably expanding its domestic drone production capabilities and innovating its long-range strike tactics. Serhiy Vyskresnov, a Ukrainian electronic and radio warfare expert, estimates Russia has increased its Shahed production sevenfold, reducing dependency on Iran by incorporating mostly Russian and Chinese components. Newer Shahed models are reportedly equipped with antennas more resistant to electronic warfare (EW) interference. Vyskresnov also forecasts a potential for Russian strike packages to soon include up to 800 Shaheds, a dramatic increase from the typical 300 to 400 as Russia prepares to build another production facility. This assessment is corroborated by Spartak Borisenko, head of the Kharkiv Oblast Prosecutor's Office, who reported observing down Garin 2 drones, the Russian-made analog of Iranian-made Shahed 130XS with modernized four-cylinder two-stroke engines, increased warheads, and new antennas and fuel systems. This surge in production is directly impacting battlefield tactics. Both the Russian Ministry of Defense MOD and Russian milbloggers have noted an increased utilization of Garin 2 drones for strikes along the front line, a significant departure from their previous use primarily against Ukraine's rear and deep rear. These drones are now being deployed to hit targets as close as 5 to 7 kilometers from the frontline areas previously targeted by glide bombs or missiles, signaling enhanced drone capabilities and a more flexible application. Ukraine's top military commander Oleksandr Syrsky acknowledged Russia's advantages in drone warfare, particularly with fiber-optic tethered drones, which are difficult to jam, stating here, "Unfortunately, they have an advantage in both the number and range of their use." However, Syrsky also vowed to increase the scale and depth of Ukrainian strikes on Russia, emphasizing that Kyiv will not just sit in defense, as this leads to retreat and loss of personnel and territory. This highlights a clear commitment to retaliatory strikes on Russian military and energy infrastructure, sometimes hundreds of kilometers from the front line, as a fair response to Russian aggression. In response to Russia's drone advancements, Ukraine is accelerating its own air defense production, recognizing the critical need to counter this evolving aerial threat. Beyond the battlefield, diplomatic and geopolitical chess moves continue. A notable development saw U.S. Special Envoy to Ukraine General Keith Kellogg meet with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko in Minsk on June 21, the first high-profile public meeting between senior U.S. and Belarusian officials since 2020. This meeting, which discussed international developments and bilateral relations, notably led to a deal brokered by U.S. Deputy Special Envoy to Ukraine John Cole for the release of 14 Belarusian political prisoners, indicating a potential opening for dialogue despite the broader conflict. Concurrently, Russia made a formal announcement of its intention to reassess its territorial waters in the Baltic Sea, publishing a list of coordinates for potential adjustments in the Gulf of Finland near several islands and the northern delta of the Narva River, which borders Estonia. This move, echoing a previously published and then deleted proposal from May 2024, signals a persistent Russian assertiveness in its maritime boundaries, potentially increasing regional tensions. On-the-ground combat remains intense across multiple axes. Russian forces continued offensive operations in Kursk Oblast, though without confirmed advances, while Ukrainian President Zelensky reported 52,000 Russian forces attacking in the Sumy direction, accounting for 23% of all frontline strikes. In Kharkiv Oblast, Russian forces continued operations north and northeast of Kharkiv city. The Luhansk Oblast saw Russian attacks in the Kupiansk and Borova directions without confirmed advances, and in the Lyman direction Russian forces continued operations, with a Ukrainian brigade spokesperson noting Russian forces' reliance on drone support in 80% of their operations, despite having a manpower advantage of poorly trained and inexperienced personnel. In Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces maintained offensive pressure in the Siversk and Chasiv Yar directions. A Ukrainian officer reported Russian attempts to seize positions near Alkasivka-Druzivka to cut off Ukrainian forces and bypass Toretsk. Russian forces also continued offensive operations in the Toretsk and Pokrovsk directions, with some unconfirmed claims of minor advances. More significantly, geolocated footage indicates recent Russian advances in the Novopavlivka direction, with elements of the 36th Motorized Rifle Brigade reportedly seizing the settlement of Zaporizhia, and in the Velika-Novosilka direction, where they likely seized western Shevchenko. A Ukrainian artillery brigade commander in the Novopavlivka direction highlighted Russian forces' novel tactic of using electric scooters in assaults to rapidly traverse contested gray zones. Russian forces also conducted limited attacks in the Huliapol and western Zaporizhia Oblast directions, as well as near the Antonivsky Bridge. Overnight from June 20 to 21, Russia launched a significant series of drone and missile strikes across Ukraine, including 2 Kh-47M2 Kinzhal air-launched ballistic missiles, 4 Caliber cruise missiles, 2 Iskander-K cruise missiles, and 272 Shahed and decoy drones. The Ukrainian Air Force reported downing 3 Caliber cruise missiles, 1 Kinzhal, 1 Iskander-K, and 140 drones, with another 112 drones lost or suppressed by Ukrainian electronic warfare systems. These strikes primarily targeted Kremenchuk, Poltava Oblast, and also damaged civilian and energy infrastructure in Odessa, Kharkiv, and Poltava Oblasts, killing at least 2 people in Donetsk Oblast, including a 17-year-old boy. As the conflict progresses, the diplomatic deadlock appears set to continue, fueled by Russia's maximalist demands and Ukraine's unwavering resolve. The technological arms race, particularly in drone development and counter-drone measures, will likely intensify, shaping battlefield dynamics and the efficacy of long-range strikes. Simultaneously, subtle diplomatic overtures like the US-Belarus meeting suggest that channels for negotiation, however limited, may remain open. However, the overarching trajectory points to a protracted conflict where military adaptation and international support will remain critical determinants of future developments. As the Russo-Ukrainian war stretches into its 1214th day, the battlefield continues to serve as a crucible for technological innovation, particularly in the realm of unmanned aerial vehicles. The conflict is increasingly defined by an accelerating drone arms race, with both sides rapidly evolving their capabilities in reconnaissance, attack, and defense. Recent developments highlight Russia's strategic shift towards self-reliance in drone warfare, while Ukraine is redoubling its efforts to counter these escalating threats through accelerated domestic production and sophisticated new interceptor technologies. A significant new tactical element has emerged from the Russian side, a novel reconnaissance drone now being deployed ahead of deadly Shahed-type loitering munition attacks. Radio technology expert Serhiy Flesh, who shared photographic evidence of a shot-down unit, revealed that this new drone visually mimics the Shahed itself, a design choice deliberately intended to confuse and mislead Ukrainian air defense systems. Operating at altitudes between 1 and 3 kilometers, the drone is equipped with a 1.2 analog transmitter capable of relaying video over distances exceeding 50 kilometers. Controlled via the robust Express LRS system for stable radio communication and high data refresh rates. This advanced reconnaissance capability allows Russian forces to swiftly assess the situation along attack routes, identify vulnerabilities in Ukrainian air defenses, and dynamically adjust their strike plans, effectively enhancing the precision and impact of subsequent Shahed attacks. In response to this persistent and evolving aerial threat, Ukraine is aggressively scaling up its own drone production, particularly for specialized interceptors. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky recently confirmed that mobile fire groups, which previously relied primarily on traditional weaponry like machine guns, are now being outfitted with these new interceptor drones. These specialized units have already proven their effectiveness, with Zelensky reporting that they are now shooting down about a third of incoming Russian loitering munitions. The domestic production effort is a collaborative undertaking involving 4 separate companies, and Ukraine anticipates receiving crucial additional financial support from Germany and Canada to further accelerate the mass production of these vital defensive assets. This emphasis on indigenous manufacturing underscores Ukraine's commitment to building a resilient, self-sufficient defense ecosystem capable of adapting to the fluid demands of modern warfare. However, the human cost of this relentless drone warfare remains devastatingly high. On June 21, a Russian drone attack launched from the north tragically claimed the life of a civilian in the Nizhyn district of Ukraine's Chernihiv Oblast. Nizhyn Mayor Oleksandr Kadola initially reported 10 explosions on the city's outskirts and one in a neighboring settlement, with Vyacheslav Chas, head of the Chernihiv Oblast military administration, later confirming the fatality. This incident is not isolated. Just over a week prior, on June 12, the 46-year-old local resident in a border village in Novorod-Siversky district, also in Chernihiv Oblast, was killed by an FPV drone strike. Even more tragically, a large-scale drone attack on Pryluki in the same oblast on the night of June 4 to 5 resulted in at least 5 deaths, including a 1-year-old baby, and caused extensive destruction to residential areas, destroying houses, garages, and vehicles. These repeated attacks underscore the indiscriminate nature of drone warfare and its profound impact on civilian populations. The sustained capability of Russia to conduct such widespread and sophisticated drone attacks despite international sanctions points to a deeper systemic challenge. Bohdan Bernatsky, a member of the Sanctions Policy Working Group of the Crimean Platform Expert Network, recently highlighted that over 1,300 Russian military companies and 2 million industrial workers continue to operate, many unhindered by international restrictions. This suggests that Russia has cultivated a robust domestic industrial base or found avenues to circumvent sanctions, enabling its self-reliance in critical military technologies like drones. President Zelensky has consistently urged for stronger enforcement of sanctions and a complete blockade of schemes that facilitate trade with Russia, particularly those maintaining connections between its energy and defense industries and the global market. He has specifically tasked the global corporate sector with severing such ties, recognizing that economic leverage is crucial in curtailing Russia's military aggression. As the conflict progresses, the reliance on and evolution of drone technology will undoubtedly continue to shape its trajectory. The current phase, characterized by sophisticated reconnaissance drones informing subsequent strikes and Ukraine's rapid development of interceptor capabilities, suggests that both sides are locked in a continuous cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation. As one expert noted, Ukraine is only in the first episode of the War of Drones, implying a long and complex technological arms race ahead. The ability to innovate, produce, and effectively deploy these unmanned systems alongside the crucial efforts to disrupt the supply chains of aggressor nations will remain central to the conflict's outcome and tragically to the daily lives of those caught in its devastating path. The geopolitical landscape of the Middle East has been thrust into a new era of heightened volatility following a series of decisive U.S. airstrikes against 3 Iranian nuclear sites, prompting an immediate and urgent diplomatic scramble. In a move underscoring the deep strategic ties between Tehran and Moscow, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi swiftly departed for Russia, slated for critical consultations with President Vladimir Putin just hours after the American military action. The strikes targeting key facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan have been met with fierce condemnation from Tehran, with Araghchi labeling them extremely dangerous, lawless, and criminal behavior, and asserting that the U.S. had crossed no red line in its actions. Araghchi, speaking from Istanbul, emphasized the enduring strategic partnership between Iran and Russia, stating, "We always consult with each other and coordinate our positions." This close alliance has seen Tehran provide Moscow with military drones instrumental in its conflict in Ukraine in exchange for support with its civilian nuclear program. The Kremlin, for its part, has maintained a complex balancing act, nurturing relations with Israel even as it deepens its bond with Iran. Indeed, Israel had reportedly been lobbying the U.S. for months to engage militarily against Iran's nuclear ambitions, intensifying its campaign after launching unilateral strikes earlier in June. From Moscow's perspective, the U.S. intervention presents a unique blend of peril and opportunity. While the strikes hit a crucial strategic partner, they also open a potential window for Russia to assert its diplomatic relevance on the global stage. The official reaction from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs was one of unequivocal condemnation, with a statement on Sunday decisively condemning the U.S. actions as a gross violation of international law, the UN Charter, and UN Security Council resolutions. This strong language, however, carries a distinct irony given Russia's own military actions in Ukraine. Despite the rhetoric, the Russia-Iran strategic partnership, though deep, is not a mutual defense pact, a point the Russian government has made clear, indicating it is not obliged to come to Iran's defense if attacked. Russian President Vladimir Putin has adopted a notably measured tone in his public comments regarding the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. While acknowledging Tehran's legitimate right to enrich uranium for civilian nuclear energy, he also nodded to Israel's security concerns over Iran's nuclear ambitions. Putin has subtly positioned Russia as a potential intermediary, stating, "We have set forth our position to both parties. We do have certain proposals involving Russia." He added, "Perhaps to manage expectations, we are by no means positioning ourselves as intermediaries. We are merely putting forward ideas." This includes a prior proposal for Russia to take custody of Iran's nuclear material for conversion into reactor fuel, a concrete suggestion made before the latest U.S. strikes. Andrei Korchinov of the government-linked Russian International Affairs Council suggested that Russia's partnership with Iran could allow Moscow to play the role of an impartial mediator, thereby strengthening its regional influence, especially following the fall of the Bashar Assad regime in Syria last year. However, Korchinov also noted the inherent risks and costs for Moscow. acknowledging that Russia failed to prevent Israel's massive strike against a state with which it signed a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement just 5 months ago and is clearly not ready to provide Iran with military assistance. The current crisis unfolds against a backdrop of significant shifts since the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA), from which the Trump administration withdrew in 2018, leading to Iran's expanded uranium enrichment program. The collapse of the Assad regime and Israel's actions against Hezbollah have further destabilized Iran's regional axis of resistance. Economically, Russia faces its own challenges, with its economy teetering on the brink of recession, according to Minister of Economic Development Maxim Reshetnikov. Yet a spiraling Middle East crisis could paradoxically benefit Russia by spiking oil prices, a cornerstone of its economic power, as the US becomes directly involved militarily in Iran. The extent of Putin's continued geopolitical leverage remains uncertain. The situation highlights the intricate web of alliances and antagonisms where each move by one global power reverberates across a complex system shaping the future of international security and energy markets. The coming days will reveal whether diplomacy, however fraught, can regain a foothold amid the rising tide of military action. The geopolitical landscape surrounding the protracted conflict in Ukraine is poised for a significant redefinition as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization prepares for a crucial two-day summit in the Netherlands this week. Historically, NATO gatherings since Russia's full-scale invasion have been solidarity showcases, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed with open arms, his nation's irreversible path to NATO membership affirmed and comprehensive security assistance pledged. However, this summit, scheduled to commence on Tuesday, marks a stark departure from that unwavering stance, largely due to a pronounced shift in the United States' foreign policy under its current administration. At previous summits, such as the weighty gathering in Washington last year or the extensive statement published in Vilnius the year prior, Ukraine held pride of place, its leader receiving a hero's welcome. A dedicated NATO-Ukraine Council was established and Kyiv's membership path was fast-tracked. Yet the upcoming meeting signals a dramatic change. NATO's most powerful member, the United States, is now actively vetoing Ukraine's membership with no clear timeline for a change in position. Diplomatic sources and experts suggest the summit statement will be remarkably concise, potentially just 5 paragraphs on a single page, with Ukraine receiving only a passing mention, a stark contrast to the lengthy communiques of previous years. President Zelensky, though invited, will not be seated at NATO's main table. This strategic pivot by Washington is rooted in a desire to preserve maneuvering space to entice Russian President Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table, according to the Trump administration, which insists Ukraine must not be allowed to steal the limelight. Recent statements and actions underscore this shift. Earlier this month, President Donald Trump suggested it might be best to let Ukraine and Russia fight for a while before intervention, an analogy he reiterated following a phone call with Putin primarily focused on Israel and Iran but also touching on Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vehemently rejected this comparison, stating, "We are not kids with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the playground in the park. He is a murderer who came to this park to kill the kids." Zelensky emphasized that those thousands of miles away cannot fully grasp the suffering endured by Ukrainians. The US administration has also warned allies of its shifting security priorities, particularly towards the Indo-Pacific and its own borders, a point underscored by Trump's early departure from the recent Group of 7 summit in Canada to focus on the Israel-Iran conflict. This left Zelensky, who had traveled to Canada specifically to meet Trump, without a scheduled meeting or a joint statement on the war. Adding to Kyiv's concerns, Trump called for Russia's readmission into the G7, a move that would significantly rehabilitate Putin on the global stage. Beyond rhetoric, the US has taken concrete steps that have weakened Ukraine's military support. Trump previously froze military aid and intelligence sharing for a week and has overseen the U.S. stepping back from the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, a crucial forum established under the Biden administration for coordinating weapons and ammunition supplies. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth notably skipped the group's last meeting, the first absence by a Pentagon chief since the 2022 invasion. Furthermore, Hegseth informed Congress on June 10 that robust funding for Ukraine military assistance consistent over the past 2 years would be reduced in the upcoming defense budget, meaning fewer critical weapons systems for Kyiv. Indeed, no new aid packages have been approved for Ukraine since Trump's return to office in January. Riley McCabe, an associate fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, warned that cutting aid could lead the Kremlin to believe that U.S. resolve is fleeting and that time is on Russia's side, thereby reducing Putin's incentive to negotiate. Despite these challenges, Ukraine continues its fight and diplomatic efforts. Zelensky recently revealed that Ukraine had received at least 20 bodies of Russian soldiers in recent exchanges, including an Israeli citizen, describing it as a result of Moscow's disorganization and disregard for its own fallen. "They threw the corpses of their citizens at us," he stated, noting that some even carried Russian passports which Moscow had insisted were Ukrainian. He expressed skepticism about Putin's sincerity in peace talks. Suspecting Russia aims to play along to appease the US and avoid sanctions without ending a war, Putin believes he is winning. Kyiv is also keenly aware of broader geopolitical shifts. Zelensky voiced Ukraine's opposition to Iran acquiring nuclear weapons, citing Tehran's military partnership with Russia, which has supplied Shahed drones and licenses for their production. He also highlighted Russia's use of the intermediate-range ballistic missile Orshnik in November, noting that 21 of the 39 Russian companies involved in its production are not yet under sanctions. Ukraine is actively seeking to boost its domestic weapons production, dispelling reports of destroyed Patriot air defense systems and confirming the use of domestically produced interceptors against Shahed drones, seeking German financing for increased output. Zelensky has urged Western partners to allocate 0.25% of their GDP to support Ukraine's local defense industry. Despite the G7 snub, Ukrainian officials have provided the U.S. Treasury Secretary with a list of desired weapons, including Patriot systems, and Zelensky plans to discuss these and sanctions in his next meeting with Trump, emphasizing the need for a new breath in the diplomatic track and greater certainty and greater pressure from the world on Putin. Internally, NATO is grappling with its own priorities. While Trump aims for the summit to primarily focus on defense spending, with allies expected to meet his demands for increased investment, European and Canadian members are determined to keep the spotlight on the war in Ukraine. They remain wary that Russia could extend its aggression to other European nations, and while supporting ceasefire efforts, express concern over the perceived closeness between Trump and Putin. Moreover, some governments may struggle to justify increased defense spending to their citizens without a strong public show of support for Ukraine and a clear acknowledgement of Russia as NATO's primary security threat. The upcoming summit, deliberately structured to be short with just one working session on Wednesday, reflects an effort to prevent potential disruptions. Its brevity may be further exacerbated by Trump's immediate focus on the Israel-Iran conflict. While Zelensky could participate in a Tuesday evening dinner with the Dutch king and foreign ministers will hold a NATO-Ukraine Council meeting where Kyiv sits as an equal, the overall tone suggests a significant recalibration of the alliance's priorities. As the war in Ukraine enters its fourth year, the shift in U.S. policy signals a precarious future for Kyiv's international support and underscores a period of profound uncertainty for global security, demanding careful navigation from all parties involved.